One of the criticisms I often hear about the true founding interpretation of Rauru's kingdom is how come the world looks almost exactly the same in the past as it is in the present. And while this observation is an oversimplification of the geographical distinctions during Rauru's founding, I can see what the critics mean. Throughout the Zelda series, the map of Hyrule has undergone many significant changes, sometimes in scale, other times in landmark locations. And seeing Rauru's kingdom looking largely consistent with the future Hyrule of Breath of the Wild might be jarring considering how much the maps have changed in short order with other titles. But I think this is more easily understood when we look at the depictions of the Zelda series a little bit more deeply than just on the surface level. Before we get into it, if you enjoy my content, like the video and subscribe for more in the future. You won't want to miss the remainder of this series. Inconsistencies are the name of the game when it comes to Zelda geography. The world gets revamped often in order to keep it fresh. This, in my opinion, is not a product of actual change in the world of Zelda, but in presentation of that world. Consider the maps of Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures. They look virtually identical to the map of A Link to the Past, despite being separated by Ocarina of Time for the former, and an entire timeline for the latter. Does this mean that the world of Zelda reverted its layout to a pre-Ocarina of Time version after the downfall and child timelines began? No, of course not. This is just the way that the world was represented in those particular titles. This is something we would expect regarding different hardware and art styles. The whole world will be displayed differently. In the case of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it isn't that Rauru's Hyrule looks identical to Breath of the Wild's alone, but rather this is how Hyrule's layout would always be presented to the player in this version in these games. If Ocarina of Time was shown in Breath of the Wild's world, it would largely share the same map with minor changes, just like Rauru's kingdom. This mindset would apply to certain landmarks like Death Mountain, being displayed with smoke rings similar to Ocarina of Time, and with a large plume of vertical smoke like Skyward Sword, almost as if the volcano is resting in a solid in-between points of those two periods of history. Another criticism I hear is that Rauru's kingdom was founded on the Great Plateau, which is stated by Zelda and King Rhoam to be the birthplace of the Kingdom of Hyrule. However, prior to Tears of the Kingdom, it was pretty well assumed by many that Ocarina of Time's Castle Town was located on the Great Plateau due to the fountain and temple ruins. But for some reason, people assume that that can now no longer be true. While Tears of the Kingdom's Masterworks book does suggest that the new castle of the present day was made after the Imprisoning War to aid Rauru's seal, it never said it was made immediately after. In fact, I will show some striking evidence in episodes 9 and 10 about how this is likely an impossible scenario, and that the castle of the present day was made much, much further in the future than some thought. Since a time prior to the launch of Breath of the Wild, we have seen mention of an ancient sea in Breath of the Wild's history. It was first noticed in the description of rock salt as far back as E3 2016. This never had too much bearing on discussion back then because there were always other matters from Breath of the Wild's Hyrule that needed to be considered as well. But with the arrival of the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and the new voice memories on the Zelda Notes app, we were given this treat of info from Princess Zelda herself. The immense Gerudo Great Skeleton lies here. Legends say that long, long ago, Hyrule was actually the bottom of a vast ocean. Considering the marine fossils that have been found across the world, I see little reason to doubt this. Except it seems to me that there are too few fossils. Maybe sea life found roots even deeper. Maybe through chasms like the one near Barida Lookout. Maybe as far as the depths. No, I'm getting carried away. With the mention of this ancient sea again following the Switch 2's launch, many began to believe that this was confirmation of Breath of the Wild's world being set after The Wind Waker. But there were many issues with taking this assumption on its face. Number 1, Zelda assumed, reasonably so, that whale fossils equate to marine life, While this might make sense to her, we know in-universe that at least one and maybe two of these Leviathan skeletons didn't actually belong to marine whales, but rather sky whales. So while Zelda's analysis does add more light to the subject, it would be naive to assume that these fossils pertain only to an ocean, let alone Wind Waker's ethereal sea. Another issue with this assumption is that we have proof of a large sea that covered Hyrule as far back as the Unified Timeline. In Skyward Sword, there is a map of the realm of Hylia in Skipper's Retreat, and most of the land is submerged beneath the waves. Not simply the Lanayru Sand Sea, but an entire ocean with peaks in between major water bodies. It is likely because of this ocean that marine fossils are found in the game's Elden Volcano. This ocean is likely the best in-universe explanation for the ocean mentioned in Breath of the Wild, as well as some other games not set in the adult timeline, like Echoes of Wisdom, which features rock salt just like Breath of the Wild, but as high up as Death Mountain. As I mentioned in a prior video, a common theory for Breath of the Wild being set in the adult timeline is that the Koroks planted trees across the Great Sea to collect sediment and form a new surface layer on top of the old Hyrule. I will explain why I don't think this works, despite it being a really good theory. One reason that Breath of the Wild's Hyrule cannot logically be a reformed landmass on top of the old Hyrule is the Zonai mining and temple infrastructure set in the depths. Zonai mines and temples are from a time before the era of myth, before the evolution of Hylians. If the depths were the old Hyrule, these structures wouldn't have survived a devastating flood like the one in Wind Waker. Therefore, the ocean must have come from a time far before Skyward Sword. And with the knowledge that the Zonai are a primordial race believed to be far older than the Hylians, many refounding theorists have suggested that the Zonai Heavenly period is an overlapping period of time with the era of myth, that the Zonai were in the skies above Hyrule for the entire Zelda timeline until Hyrule was destroyed and ripe for a refounding. The problem with this mindset is that the Zonai continued to mine in the depths while they were in the heavens, and for much of this history they maintained contact with the surface tribes, so the world couldn't be flooded during the Zonai's heavenly period. And even when the Zonai went no contact with the surface world, likely due to the beginnings of their extinction crisis or conflict, they still mined in the depths during this time period. The depths being blocked by an ethereal sea wouldn't comport with that reality. In keeping with this understanding of Hyrule's geography, Death Mountain is a large open chasm in the depths. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense for it to be an old volcanic top, as its base would have to be even wider than it already is. The surface of Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is the same as the surface going back to Skyward Sword. Even if you are a refounding theorist, it should be pretty clear that the depths have been unflooded since before the era of the sky. There is another point of contention against a refounding set after the events of Wind Waker. We know that Tetra, her pirate crew, and Link, the hero of Winds, established a new kingdom of Hyrule on a separate continent. This kingdom was well established and even defended even just 100 years after the events of Wind Waker. Tetra was the bloodline of Hyrule's royalty in the adult timeline, so if a refounding was true, Queen Sonia would have to be descended from Tetra. While this alone isn't a problem, it will raise complications later in this so-called refounding. What happened to New Hyrule? If a refounding was true, Tetra's descendants would have to have developed and maintained their new kingdom for absolutely nothing, even though this new land was part of King Daphne's Triforce wish. Tetra's bloodline would have to leave New Hyrule for some unseen reason, go back to the old Hyrule, which was stated to be volatile during the Zonai's heavenly period, just to live there and not refound their kingdom again. If you're wondering then if it's possible that Queen Sonia just isn't related to Tetra in this refounding scenario, well, that's simply impossible. Sonia is stated in Tears of the Kingdom's Masterworks to be like an incarnation of the goddess. This isn't to be misunderstood as a reincarnation of the goddess like Skyward Sword Zelda, but rather an in-the-flesh manifestation of her presence. In other words, she's descended from Skyward Sword Zelda. Breath of the Wild Zelda is also called an incarnation of the goddess, and we know she carries the blood of Hylia reborn. So incontrovertibly, Sonia has to have the same bloodline. Meaning, in a refounding scenario in the adult timeline, her ancestors would needlessly abandon New Hyrule for a largely inhospitable Old Hyrule that wouldn't even be settled by the Zonai for centuries or even millennia. This explanation of the refounding theory is unsatisfactory to me. It requires a large devastating event to happen in New Hyrule for which we have no evidence, as well as a thematic contradiction with Wind Waker's ending, where somehow the Kingdom of Hyrule was wished to be drowned away forever by the Triforce, but never mind, we have the Master Sword, the Triforce, and the entire kingdom again. No problem. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Episode 4 is going to be really great. Thanks guys, later.